Here we are back to Mr. Orth's Flipped Classroom for Grammar, looking at Pronoun-Antecedent Agreement. An antecedent is the noun or pronoun that a pronoun replaces or refers to. You may have a teacher who's actually used the term referent, or just the word refer, ENT, in place of the word antecedent. I prefer antecedent because we're looking for that word to come before. If you look at the word parts, ante, A-N-T-E, in Latin and Spanish means before. And cede has to do with kind of placement or where something comes in a series. Okay, so if it literally is that which comes before. So antecedent seems to help a lot of students know where to look to figure out how to understand their pronouns. Pronoun-Antecedent Agreement, as an idea, can also be marked from an editing standpoint as AGR-PA on your sheets or your homework or your papers when given feedback by an editor. This is where the pronoun aligns properly to the antecedent in number, person, and gender. If you see the mark on your paper, it means it doesn't align in some way, shape, or form. In many cases, what you're looking at is the wrong number, such as you've gone from singular to plural, wrong gender, maybe it's you have a singular and you wanted to use both genders, you didn't put he or she, or a person where you switch between I and you somewhere in your sentence. Common errors. Generally speaking, in your writing, avoid using the word you. Don't use second person pronouns unless you're going to use second person throughout. This is most commonly found when you're giving directions to someone. People know you can't take it with you. Well, as a teacher, I'm going to write H-D-Y-K. How do you know? People know this, and how do you know that they can't take it with them? You is kind of a dangerous thing. You don't know your audience as well as you might think, therefore you might not want to say you, implying everyone in your audience. Avoid second person. Don't switch from plural to singular and vice versa. It's not clever, it's not good word choice, it's not even descriptive. In most cases, it's going to be confusing. Players can't afford to lose her uniforms. Well, that might seem obvious to you. All right, how about if it said, each player can't afford to lose their uniform. Each player is singular. Their is going to be plural. So it's the same problem. One way it might just look more obvious to than others. If you simply said, keep it plural, players can't afford to lose their uniforms, well, there you go. Use both genders only if you mean both genders. There are times where we'll use both genders as a way of simply copying out and not necessarily specifying what we mean. If we're referring to only female students, for example, in an all-female class or members of the basketball team, coach might speak to that group and say each student should do her homework. Each student is singular, therefore their, T-H-E-I-R, wouldn't be appropriate. If it's an all-female audience being spoken out here, then her is appropriate if you're talking about it individually, each student. If you want to use his or her, that's acceptable, provided both genders apply. They don't in all cases. And yes, it's perfectly acceptable to use her or his, as opposed to always saying his or her with the masculine first. All right, other common errors when it comes to using pronouns and antecedents in agreement deals with compound subjects. Whenever you have a plural pronoun dealing with subjects that are joined by and, that's always your best bet. To rephrase it a little more clearly, when you have two subjects joined by and, one plus something else, unless it's a negative number, one plus something else is going to be more than one. And that's kind of how we define, in terms of grammar, plural. It's more than one. Therefore, if you have two subjects or antecedents joined by and, then you treat the replacement of that as plural. So one plus something else is going to have to be either, it's going to be we or our. It's going to have to be they or them. And you, of course, doesn't change in English. That's why we tend to like you so often, is because it doesn't specify whether it's singular or plural, and it covers some of our mistakes. However, second point about compound subjects. If you have two subjects or antecedents joined by or and nor, You only have to worry about which one comes second, which one comes after the or, which one comes after nor. If we have the example of 2 apples or 1 orange, we might think, well, it's more than one thing, so we automatically would resort to using plural, they or them. Not so. If we have or 1 orange, then 1 orange is the only thing we're worried about matching. So we would use it as opposed to they or them in this example. It's tricky, but make sure you're always checking to say, okay, am I looking at more than one thing here or not? And if I have a compound subject, or object for that matter, always check to see what kind we have. Is it and, or nor? Collective nouns. Ugh, these are fun. So the collective noun is used as a whole, then you use a singular pronoun. If the whole band is performing, then you refer to the band then as it following. It's similar to the confusion we have with collective nouns and subject-verb agreement. If we talk about individual members of the Senate, the members are, then we're going to use they or them as plural to follow that up. Okay? So when it's multiple individuals that we're talking about here, then use plural pronouns to replace them. If we have it used as a whole, singularly, it's a one group, one thing, one school, one class, then you use it or he, most often it, to refer to the group. Each student has the opportunity to grow and learn. They can do their best if they just try. Pretty common, might have heard this year when you started your first class. Problem, who are they and their? That's plural. It's going back to each student, except each student is singular, student singular. Should be he or she can do his or her best if he or she just tries. That might get clunky and awkward. Fine. Then say all students and make students plural, and then you can use they. Sometimes it's easier to change the antecedent than it is to change the pronoun. So an example is said here, each student has the opportunity to grow and learn. He or she can do his or her best if he or she just tries. Getting kind of awkward. I still like the change of doing all students. In which case it's more inclusive, stays plural, and uses fewer words, and more likely conveys what you intended in the first place. All right, get to it, take your time, ask questions. You've got this.